Everyone, we've got just another couple minutes here before we get started. So thank you for being early to the municipalities and the local redistricting process webinar today. We are joined by the Wisconsin Legislative Reference Bureau as well as Legislative Technology Services Bureau, who will be presenting today. Before we get started, I want to go through your communication options. If you hover over the bottom middle portion of your screen, you can see a chat box. If you're having technical difficulties today, feel free to use that chat box to message me and I will respond to you. If you do have questions on the content for our presenters today, there's a Q&A box just for that. So go ahead and pop open that Q&A box and put your questions in there as you think of them. And we'll answer a few of those. We might answer those through chat as well. So just pay attention there. And if there are any good links that we want to share, we'll throw those up in the chat box and you can see those as well. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Joe Cry as we get started here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I am Joe Cry from the Legislative Reference Bureau. I'm one of the senior coordinating attorneys there at the LRB. I am joined today by with Michael Gallagher, who's also senior coordinating attorney, and Stacy Duros, who's a legislative analyst, and will be available to answer your questions and walk you through the process somewhat. We're going to get started with a little bit of information on the Legislative Reference Bureau and what we do. Then I will cover the basic redistricting law and principles. And after that, Mike Gallagher will discuss local redistricting procedure and timeline, which is probably what most of you are mostly interested in. A little bit about the LRB. We were founded in 1901. The LRB provides legal research and informational services. And as you can see from the slide, we are a nonpartisan agency. We provide confidential legislative drafting services to legislators. We also provide nonpartisan and confidential research services to legislators, state and local government officials and agencies, and the public. We draft all legislation for introduction in the legislature. We prepare the executive budget bill. We draft all amendments and write analysis for all legislation. The LRB staff also conducts legal, public policy, and historical research and provides information about the legislature and its proceedings. Additionally, we publish the laws of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin statutes and annotations, the administrative code and register, and the Blue Book. In the redistricting process, the LRB drafts the redistricting bill. It's like any other bill. Now that we've touched on what the LRB does, we can talk about basic redistricting principles and laws. The first thing we need to discuss is the terminology that's being used. We have reapportionment and redistricting. The terms reapportionment and redistricting seem to be used interchangeably, even though technically the term reapportionment refers to redividing the number of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives based on each state's portion of the national population. Redistricting is the process by which electoral district boundaries are redrawn periodically to adjust for shifts in population and to ensure proper representation for all potential voters in a given geographic area. But why do we do this in the first place? The United States Constitution mandates that congressional seats be apportioned to the states according to the population count from the federal census. Specifically, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution provides that the actual enumeration, the census, shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, that of course has taken place, and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. This clause, often referred to as the Census Clause or the Enumeration Clause, mandates an actual enumeration or a complete count of every resident in every household in the U.S., and it gives Congress the authority to direct how such count is conducted. Congress has delegated that responsibility and management of the census to the U.S. Department of Commerce and its U.S. Census Bureau. You also have to look at Amendment 14, Section 2 to the U.S. Constitution, which further clarifies that Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state. We're also looked at Title 13 of the U.S. Code, which provides for the process of a complete count of the United States population every 10 years in order to reallocate the 435 seats of the United States House of Representatives to account for population changes. The federal decennial census kicks off the whole process depending on population shifts that are determined by the most recent census. Some states will gain congressional seats, some will lose seats, while others will retain the same number. We expect that Wisconsin will not lose any seats. Since 2000, Wisconsin has apportioned 8 seats to the House of Representatives. After the congressional seats have been reapportioned, each state must redraw congressional and legislative district lines. And of course, we have state constitutional requirements. In Wisconsin, the state's bicameral legislature, composed of the Wisconsin State Senate and the Wisconsin State Assembly, has the power to redraw both congressional and legislative district boundaries subject to the governor's approval. In Wisconsin, redistricting laws are enacted in the same way, in the same manner as other laws. There are, of course, federal redistricting requirements. The two that we will touch on are equal population and minority protection. Equal population is the most crucial principle involved in redistricting because it's the catalyst for the whole process. The concept of equal population means that electoral districts should be equal in population so that they do not violate the one person, one vote principle that the U.S. Supreme Court has found is embedded in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. If districts were drawn disproportionately with respect to population, the weight of each vote would be different. For example, in an underpopulated district, a vote might be worth more than in an overpopulated district where a vote would be worth less. When districts are drawn with equal population, each resident has equal access to government no matter where he or she lives. The degree of population equality among congressional and legislative districts can be determined and evaluated through a few statistical measurements. And those are listed there on the slide. The number of equal population is calculated using the concept of ideal population or the target population for each equal population district under a redistricting plan. We also will talk about absolute deviation, relative deviation, and overall range. Ideal population can be calculated by dividing the total population of the unit being divided into districts by the number of districts being created. So for example, if a state's total population is 5 million and there are 50 legislative districts, the ideal population for each district is 100,000. The Wisconsin Department of Administration's Demographic Service Center, their 2009 state total population estimate as of January 1st, 2019 was 5,843,443. Obviously, we won't be using that number when we draw new maps. We'll have a census number to rely on, but for purposes of our example here, hypothetically in Wisconsin, if we were to redistrict today, the ideal population for a state assembly district would be 59,025, and for a Senate district would be 177,074. A congressional district would be 730,430. And again, we're dividing the total population by the number of districts to come up with the ideal population. Another statistical measurement to check how well redistricting efforts achieve population equality is by calculating the absolute deviation, or the difference between the population of a given district and an ideal population. The measurement assesses the degree by which a single district's population varies, exceeding or falling short from the ideal population district. Absolute deviation is derived by subtracting the ideal population from the population of a given district And that number is used to determine the extent to which an actual district is larger, it has a plus deviation, or a positive value, or smaller, it has a negative deviation, or a negative value than the ideal district size. The number can be expressed as a percentage, which indicates the proportion by which the population exceeds or falls short of the ideal population, by dividing a district's absolute deviation by the ideal population. That result is called relative deviation. Might have got ahead of myself just a little bit here. Relative deviation, the absolute deviation divided by ideal population. Both absolute and relative deviation are used to assess equality of population at the district level. So another example using our 100,000 ideal population number, if the ideal population per district is 100,000 and the actual population of a particular district is 99,000, you have absolute deviation of minus 1,000, total population minus ideal population. You have a relative deviation of minus 1%, your absolute deviation divided by ideal population. And that brings us to overall range, which is the difference in population between the smallest and the largest districts. Used as a measurement to evaluate a district plan as a whole, whether at the state or at a local level. And that would be the difference in population between the smallest and largest districts. And again, we're using that to measure its deviation as a whole. So if the largest district's population is 101,000 and the smallest district's population is 98,000, the overall range is, well, we start with the ideal population, which is 100,000. We know that the largest district is plus 1,000. The smallest district is minus 1,000. So the overall range, ignoring the plus and minus signs, would be 3,000 people or 3%. Should be noted too that during a litigation, courts normally measure a redistricting plan using the concept of overall range. But the courts might refer to the concept and the quotient generated through its calculation using different terms. The courts have also found that the overall ranges that are less than 10% are generally regarded as complying with one person, one vote. It's not a safe harbor necessarily, so if you were to have a overall range that is 10% or less, it still could be subject to litigation based on violating certain other principles, which we'll talk more in depth on what those principles are. So again, just to elaborate somewhat, when drawing state and local legislative districts, jurisdictions are permitted to deviate somewhat from perfect population equality to accommodate traditional districting objectives. Among those, preserving the integrity of political subdivisions, maintaining communities of interest, and creating geographic compactness. And again, 10% or less is presumptively complying with one person, one vote. Moving on to constitutional standards for equal population. Congressional districts must be as nearly equal in population as practicable. This amounts to really strict enforcement of that rule. No level of population inequality is deemed too small for judicial challenge. State legislative districts must be drawn with substantial equality of population, with an overall range of 10% from the ideal population. Wisconsin has historically applied a much higher population deviation standard for its districts with an overall range of less than 2%. And you can see, going back to 1982, we're more or less substantially under 2%. 1982 being actually the largest deviation of 1.74% in overall range. The other constitutional standard that we have to be aware of and factor into our map drawing is the protection of minorities. Racial and ethnic minority protection and protecting them from vote dilution. While the Supreme Court worked through population equality and inequality issues, Congress enacted the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in order to remedy the inequality of opportunity given to racial and ethnic minorities participate in elections. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibited any state or political subdivision from imposing a voting qualification or prerequisite to voting or standard, practice, or procedure that would deny or abridge the right to vote on account of race or color. In 1975, the ban on voting qualifications or prerequisites was made permanent, and coverage of the act was broadened to include members of language minority groups. This tends to be Alaskan Native, American Indian language groups, and some Asian American language groups. In 1982, Section 2 was made to apply to any plan that results in discrimination against a member of a racial or language minority group, regardless of the intent of the plan's drafters. In practice, at its most basic level, a redistricting map may be constitutionally challenged if it splits up a race or language minority group and combines its members with a majority group. That would limit the ability of that minority group to elect a candidate of its choice. This is known as vote dilution. A redistricting plan in which the voting strength of a minority group is diluted is most often constitutionally challenged because the plan violates either the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment or the plan violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Sometimes it violates both. In 1986, case of Thornburg v. Jingles, I think it's pronounced Jingles, it's Gingles, the Supreme Court set preconditions that a minority group must prove in order to establish a violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The court identified 3 factors to determine a violation of Section 2. 1, whether the minority group is sufficiently large and geographically compact to constitute a majority in a single member district, whether the minority group is politically cohesive, i.e. it tends to vote as a bloc, and whether the majority votes sufficiently as a bloc to enable it in the absence of special circumstances, usually to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. If these factors exist, then the plan can be challenged as discriminatory. However, a state's redistricting plan is subject to strict judicial scrutiny only if race is the predominant motive for this final shape of the district. So you can consider race, but you can't consider it too much. It cannot be the predominant motive for why you drew map lines. Other than the required federal principles of equal population.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. So I think we should probably skip the other traditional principles because we're running short on time, and so I can get into local redistricting. Or maybe you want to run through them really quick?
I'll run through them really quick, Mike, and we'll get right to it.
All right.
The traditional districting principles: compactness, contiguity, preserving communities of interest, and preserving the unity of political subdivisions. Compactness, if it's it looks like what it sounds like. Districts should be more like the blue district that's on that slide and less like the non-compact one. Contiguity, the boundaries should be, with the exception of some island territory and because of annexations, all the area of a district should be contiguous. Communities of interest is a harder concept. It usually deals with putting kind of like-minded or similar people together in a group, and this is different than racial, ethnic, or linguistic groups. Unity of political subdivisions, trying to avoid crossing county, city, or town boundaries when drawing district lines, and Mike will talk about this more in detail with regards to the local redistricting. The Wisconsin Constitution sets forth a lot of these principles to apportion anew after the census, requiring assembly districts to be bounded by county, precinct, town, and ward lines, contiguous territory, and compact, and Section 5, which requires convenient contiguous territory for Senate districts. And on that, I will let Mike take over.
Thanks, Joe.
You bet.
Yeah, he's used to me rudely interrupting him anyway, so go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Okay. So moving on to the local redistricting process, I'll just reiterate that the principles that Joe discussed that apply to congressional and state legislative redistricting plans also apply to varying degrees to local redistricting plans. In terms of equal population, what that means is that a local redistricting plan, such as a city aldermanic redistricting plan, has to qualify or has to satisfy that 10% overall range threshold. And then also in terms of minority population, as Joe said, districts can't be drawn with race as the predominant motivating factor, but the exception to that is that if it's necessary to satisfy the Voting Rights Act. And LTSB has nifty software that really helps you do all of that, providing you information with respect to the population and what the overall range is and the ethnic makeup of various communities, census blocks, wards, etc. So, but I just want to emphasize that does apply. But I'm going to talk primarily about the local redistricting process and timeline. So with respect to the process itself, it occurs in 3 phases. The first phase, in the first phase, counties adopt tentative supervisory district plans. In the second phase, municipalities adjust wards. And in the third phase, counties adopt final supervisory district plans and cities adopt aldermanic district plans. So each of the 3 phases consists of a 60-day work period, and each phase has to be completed before the next phase may begin. And the official publication of the census data and block level census maps for Wisconsin starts the clock ticking on the whole process. So this data is typically received about 1 year before the date of the census, and the last redistricting cycle, census data was received on March 10th, 2011. The actual deadline under federal law is March 31st. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the complications, that are 2020 complications, potentially, hopefully not, with respect to the timing of the local redistricting process, and I'll leave that for the end. So the first thing that happens is that within 60 days after the publication of the official census data, the counties adopt tentative supervisory district plans. And then there's kind of a backstop July 1, 2021 deadline. But when we look at the timeline, you'll see that the 60-day period really falls before that. That's just kind of an ultimate sort of backstop. So I'll just briefly run through the county board's responsibilities in terms of adopting a plan, and then I'll skip to talking about wards. So in proposing a tentative plan, the county is responsible for soliciting suggestions from municipalities concerning the development of an appropriate plan. There has to be a public hearing, and the county has to submit a copy of the proposed plan to each municipal governing body in the county. And in the event that a municipality is being requested to divide into 2 or more, or needs to be divided into 2 more supervisory districts that can't be accommodated within the existing ward plan, then the board must also submit a written statement to the municipality indicating the approximate location and the population of the wards that the county proposes to have established in order to accommodate the supervisory district plan. Okay, in terms of the plan itself, I'm just going to skip through that and then move on to phase 2. So in phase 2, municipalities have 60 days after the adoption of the tentative county supervisory district plan in their county to adjust their ward boundaries. And so I'm just going to say a couple of things about wards before going on. So wards play a central role in redistricting in Wisconsin because they're the building blocks for election districts at every level, from the federal to the local. Ward boundaries are intended to be as permanent as possible. Changes made only to accommodate changes in population, alterations in municipal boundaries, and the requirements of creating electoral districts of equal population. But they are intended to remain, fairly static to the extent possible. We'll talk about when they have to be adjusted later. The statutes require all cities, villages, and towns in Wisconsin with a population of 1,000 or more to divide into wards for municipalities under 1,000, there's no requirement to divide into wards, but they can do so if it eases the administration of elections. Also, a county may request that a city under 1,000 divide into wards in order to accommodate a county supervisory district plan. We'll talk more about that. So in terms of creating wards, wards generally have to be comprised of whole census blocks, but there are exceptions to those, and all of this is under section 5.15 of the statutes. And I also mentioned it in the chat, but I encourage you to look up the LRB 2020 redistricting guidebook, which is comprehensive with respect to congressional, state legislative, but also local redistricting. So it's a really good resource, and so make sure you look at that. All of this is discussed in detail in that guidebook. These are statutory requirements. Wards have to suit the convenience of voters, respecting communities of interest, generally comprised of contiguous territory except for island territory, comply with the population ranges specified by law, which we'll talk about just in a minute, must lie entirely within one county and one municipality, so they can't cross municipality or county lines. And finally, they have to be designated by whole numbers beginning with the number 1. Okay, so in terms of population ranges, again, these are in section 5.15, subsection 2, paragraph B of the statutes. There are exceptions. There are times when a ward can, when a municipality under 1,000, we've already talked about that, can be divided into wards. And there are also some exceptions to establishing wards below these ranges, but these are the standards. And the statutes also say that wards should be established at a convenient level within the population ranges you see here in order to accommodate changes in population over time. Okay, so in terms of actual, what happens in phase 2, wards may have to be adjusted to reflect changes in population since the last census, changes in minority population, migration or shifts in minority population over the last census. Under the statutes, Wisconsin statutes really kind of codify the Voting Rights Act of 1965 with respect to wards. It says that they may have to be adjusted, quote, to enhance the participation of members of a racial or language minority group in the political process and their ability to elect representatives of their choice. So, and I want to emphasize that wards are not election districts, right? So they don't have to satisfy equal population requirements, but they do have to, but in establishing wards, you do have to take into account minority population to the extent that wards should be established in such a way that supervisory districts and aldermanic districts can be established that satisfy the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So it's a little bit complicated. And again, Ryan will talk about the nifty LTSB software that helps you do all of that. Okay. Changes in municipal boundaries. Some of these are kind of no-brainers. Facilitate the establishment of county supervisory districts. And the statutes say that a municipality must make a good faith effort to accommodate a county supervisory district plan and divide itself into wards in a manner permitting the creation of county supervisory districts of substantially equal population. Again, we're talking that 10% threshold. All right, facilitate the creation of aldermanic districts, same idea, and potentially accommodate a legislative redistricting plan that happened famously in 2011, Wisconsin Act 39. In the 2010 cycle, the legislature passed a redistricting plan, at warp speed, and faster than had done in 80 years. And one party controlled both the legislature and the governor's mansion, and so there were actually redistricting plans, legislative redistricting plans in place before wards have been adjusted. Okay, so if that were to happen again, there is law in the books now that provides a process for that. However, given political reality, this time around, it's not likely to happen. Okay, okay. And then phase 3, so 60 days after the new ward plans are adopted by municipalities, then counties can adopt their final supervisory district plans, and then cities that don't elect their common council at large can redistrict their aldermanic districts. Okay, just a couple of words about the timeline. Okay, so this timeline is assuming that the Census Bureau, that the census data is published no later than March 31, 2021, which is the federal deadline. In that case, the counties would have 60 days after that to adopt a tentative supervisory district plan. So that would be May 30, 2021 would be the drop dead date. However, a county could adopt its supervisory district plan in 25 days. And so, if you've got a supervisory district plan that's adopted on April 25th, that starts the clock ticking for adjusting ward boundaries. So the municipalities have 60 days to do that, but in that case, it would be 60 days from April 25th, not May 30th. So it's important to keep that in mind. And then of course, that affects the rest of the timeline in your county, depending on when your county adopts its tentative supervisory district plan. Just a word about the census potential delays. So the Census Bureau has gone back and forth on whether or not there might be delays in delivering census data based on, obviously delays to census field operations as a result of COVID. Okay. Currently, the Census Bureau, and actually for some time now, has been saying that it's going to get the census data to the states for redistricting by March 31st, which is the federal deadline. Now, they did say recently that they might not get the apportionment data to the president until late January, but they haven't said that they're going to get census data any later than March 31. So that's kind of what we're operating on right now. But that's something to pay attention to. You'll want to be looking at that as that date approaches, and thinking about how it might. I don't want to worry you too much because they're saying they're going to get it done. Affect the upcoming 2022 election timeline for local elections. So for the spring election. As I said, I'm going to give one more plug for our comprehensive redistricting guidebook available on LRB's website. I think it's already also linked on LTSB's website. And then also just feel free to get in touch with Joe or me or Stacy Duros, who's joining us incognito right now, if you have any questions. So that's what we're here for. We're happy to answer them. So.
Hey, Mike, we do have one question before we let Ryan take over.
Okay.
Is there a way to suggest a redistricting change to the state? For example, our whole city is in one assembly district, but because of an annexation, we have a very small section of the city in another assembly district.
Right. Is there a way to, I'm sorry.
Is there a way to suggest a redistricting change to the state?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, so your wards and typically your any aldermanic districts, whatever, those will all be done before the state actually does a legislative redistricting plan. I mean, you can contact your legislators, your assembly representative and senator in the area, certainly, and then. Beyond that, Joe, do you have any other suggestions?
No, I don't. With something like that, because of an annexation, and maybe Ryan can jump in here at some point too, but I would hope with the redrawing new lines that annexation was considered and they would just redrew the line so it was all contained in one assembly district.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, with that, I'll hand it off to Ryan.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Stacy. I'll turn my screen on really quick. Hopefully you can see everything.
Looks good.
All right. Hello, my name is Ryan Squires. I'm the GIS manager for the Legislative Technology Services Bureau. We're the IT bureau of the legislature. I'm here to talk to you today about WISE-LR, which is our solution for local redistricting this year in 2020. This is actually the third iteration of WISE-LR. So every 10 years, we kind of reinvent the wheel here and start from scratch and build it for the current statutes and the current technology. So this is our iteration this year. So as I mentioned, this is our solution for local redistricting. It means Wisconsin Shape Editor for local redistricting. We develop it entirely in LTSB. It's a web application, so you don't need any special software to access it. It's all through a web browser. And you'll use it to draw supervisory districts, municipal ward plans, aldermanic plans, and be able to see what the people in your county are doing and how your plans are interacting with each other. The system was also built with Wisconsin statutes in mind, so we try to build in as many statutes as possible and help guide you through the process of local redistricting. So there's kind of 3 parts to it, and we'll kind of go through them quickly here, but I can maybe do a demo at the end if we have time. But it's kind of the WISE-LR administrator and the WISE-LR editor. So the administrator is what's going to guide you through the stages and the timelines of local redistricting, and help you keep on track with all of your 60-day timeline dates and when you're passing things off to each other. And then the editor is what you actually use to draw these plans. WISE-LR is built into the WISE Decade system. So WISE Decade is what's currently used in the county level to submit your municipal boundaries and wards every 6 months to the legislature. So every January, when the county submits their local wards, municipal boundaries to us, we use that to compare it against the current U.S. Census federal boundaries, and we update the U.S. Census with that information. This is important because when we get the blocks that are numbered with the actual population in them coming back from the U.S. Census, we should have accurate boundaries, hopefully, as of January 1st, 2020, with the information we received from your county about your municipal boundaries. So to address the earlier question about making sure annexations are within your correct district, hopefully these kind of efforts all decade long will have helped that. I'll get to more details about how annexations are addressed, but in summary, the entire process of redistricting, there is a method for your land information officer, your county, to update the boundaries in the system to make sure that any annexations are included. So if you had annexation right before you pass that ward plan, we can get it in there at the last second. But there's a big process for the LIO to go through, land information officers, what LIO means, I'm sorry, to get that information into you. So as I said, this was built in the WISE Decade system that the counties are already using, but everyone will be given a password and access to the system for specifically the WISE-LR. Your login name is just your county, so Dane County is just Dane, and then your password will be given will let you access the WISE-LR page you'll see on the right. This is the WISE-LR administrator. You'll see there's panels here on the left side, and each of these are the different phases of local redistricting. Mike talked about those 3 phases: the first drawing supervisory districts, the second drawing municipal wards, and the third the reconciliation of those municipal wards and districts. There's 2 extras here, and those are the stage 0, as we call it, and the aldermanic districts. So stage 0 is that step I mentioned before about getting your annexations into the geography, so they're all properly included in your ward geography when it goes to the legislature, and they use those to draw the assembly districts. The LIO for the county will have to come in through here, and they will insert the latest municipal boundaries into the system, cut the current U.S. Census blocks to include anything that's missing in the U.S. Census data, to properly allocate those people and the geography to the right municipality. There's a ton more detail about this process and a bunch of instructions specifically for the LIOs on our website, which is posted at the bottom of the screen there. And there are also special LIO sessions that'll be happening in January and have been happening to kind of talk about this process to make sure that geography is always consistent with what is currently on the ground. These other phases you'll see in there is aldermanic districts, which is stage A at the end there. While statutorily it's supposed to take place during the 3rd period, it can really take place anytime once a municipality has drawn their wards. Aldermanic districts are done by grouping wards together. So as soon as stage 2 is done, the city can technically, or the municipality can technically start grouping wards in the aldermanic districts. The caution there is that if in stage 3, the reconciliation of supervisory districts in your wards, those wards get changed in any way, your aldermanic district plan will be void because your underlying wards have changed. So at stage 0 is that confirmation of block boundaries. And again, there's a lot more information about this on our website for the Inland Information Officers and how this is done. If you have specific questions about getting your annexations and ensuring they're actually in this geography, you can talk to your LIO or to us, and we'll be happy to talk to you about the process. This is a little bit more how it's actually done. So the first stage, which is done at the county level, which I guess isn't this audience right here, but it's good to know how it works, is a 60-day phase for drawing the supervisory districts. You'll see on my screenshot here, there's a bunch of dates under each one of these little panels here. In my screenshot, it looks like stage 0 happened on, again, these dates are totally fictional, it's based on when we took a screenshot, on March 10th, 2020, and then it looks like the stage right here, stage 1, began on March 10th, 2020, and it's due on May 9th, 2020. So it's 60 days from the start of redistricting. And all these dates afterwards in stage 2 and 3, you'll see tentative start dates. And that's because those are 60 days based on if stage 1 happened to take a full 60 days. If, in my example, the county only took 2 days and we're done on March 12th to complete stage 1, stage 2 would begin then on March 12th. It's 60 days after the end of stage 1. So your 60 days begins the moment stage 1 is over, not to the maximum date, which if in this hypothetical world, it had started on March 10th, your stage 2 would have been in the maximum worlds July 8th, but it'd be much sooner as soon as they finished in stage 1. I mean, again, as works the same way in stage 3. So as soon as municipalities are submitted their plans required, stage 3 will automatically begin. So again, this is stage 1 here, and this is going to, everybody who's logging into this county is going to see the same thing. They're all going to see the county working its way through this process. They'll see this staging updating on the left side, all these dates updating on the left side. On the right here in the supervisory district plans, what they would do is you select create new plan or load an existing plan. You give it a plan name. It defaults to a district count. So for counties, statutes describe a maximum number of supervisors that a county can have based on their current population. So it defaults to that. You enter your email and a password. So this plan is for you and you alone. If you're on part of the municipality, you want to draw a plan, no one wants to see it yet, it's private. That's how it works until you share it. And then at the bottom, you'll see you have a start with option for currently enacted, or you can start a plan as someone else's plan. So currently enacted means that we'll translate the current wards as they exist to the new U.S. Census geography. And you'll be able to start a plan based on how it is today and then work from there. Or you can start with a blank plan, or if someone shares their plan, you can start as their plan. We'll get more into that as well. And this is kind of the more pertinent part to everyone here, which is the stage 2 municipal wards. In my screenshot examples here, it looks like my county in stage 1 only took 1 day. They're amazing. They do all their districts on February 17th, 2020, and they finished it, which means stage 2 began in my county on February 17th, 2020, the same day it began stage 1, because we're so efficient in doing stage 1, which would never happen in reality, but in my screenshot world, that's what happened. That means my calendar was adjusted here, and we have only until February 17th of 2020 to finish this, all of us who are required. My screenshot here is basically a splitting of a web page where the bottom half, the right half is on the bottom. But it's the same thing as on stage 1, where you create a new plan, enter your plan name, it defaults to a district count, which should be the current number of wards that it has right now, an email, a password, and again, as an existing or as a blank plan or somebody else's. The only additional step here in stage 2 versus stage 1 is you have to select your specific municipality. So in my example here, the town of Albion is creating a plan here. The bottom half of my screen is showing me the status of the municipalities in my county. You'll see there are a few colors here. So as Mike mentioned, municipalities that have less than 1,000 people will not have to draw wards unless they're divided by a legislative district or some other supervisory district. But even in stage 2, even if you're divided by a supervisory district from stage 1's tentative plan, you don't necessarily have to create a ward plan if you have less than 1,000 people. That'll have to be rectified in stage 3, but we'll get to that in a second. So we see in my example here, the town of Monopoly has less than 1,000 people, so they don't have to submit a plan. They can, they're shown in gray, but if they do submit a plan, they have the option. Whereas the town of Algoma, the city of Algoma has submitted a plan. Mrs. Peacock did on February 18th. It was ordinance ABC 123, and I can view it by clicking on the button on the right and into a simple map viewer, interactive map viewer. But then you can see the town of Casco is red because it has over 1,000 people, and it requires then a ward plan of some kind, and they have not submitted one yet or confirmed it yet. When all the required municipalities, basically all the reds have turned green, the stage 2 will automatically end, kick over to stage 3. That doesn't mean if the village of Casco, if we're in stage 3, if the village of Casco wants to go back and make a plan, they didn't have to before, but they decided they want to make a plan, they could always go back and make one and submit one. Nothing's going to stop them. But the ones that are required must finish it, and when it finishes, it'll kick over to stage 3. And stage 3 looks like this, the reconciliation of those two plans, the ward plans and the supervisory district plans. Sorry, am I getting a message getting beeped here? The system does not retain any plans from 2011 other than it does, because it translates the current plans that you have on the ground into the new wards. So plans you drew hypothetically in 2011 does not retain. No, this is all fresh. But plans that have that were actually passed will be in the system because they'll be translated into the current geography. Sorry about that. So stage 3, this is going to show the difference between the ward plans that are passed in stage 2 and plans that are passed in stage 1. So the county lines, every municipal ward has to nest wholly inside of a supervisory district. So if a municipality is divided by a supervisory district that didn't otherwise have to create a ward plan, it'll show up here as red. If I drew a ward plan like as a village and it conflicts with my supervisory district plan that was passed in stage 1, it'll also show up here in red. There's nothing in the statute that says that the municipality has to change or the county has to change. All it says is you have to reconcile the differences. So at this point, the county can go back and pass a new supervisory district plan in stage 1 to make it align with what you've passed in stage 2, or the municipality would have to go back to stage 2 and pass a new municipal ward plan. When it does that, it'll compare it against what was passed at stage 1, see if the lines match up, and if the wards nest wholly within the supervisory districts. If it does, your municipality will turn green. In my screenshot example here, the town of Pierce didn't submit a ward plan, presumptively because they have less than 1,000 people, but they're showing red here now because whatever I passed in stage 1 must have divided the town in some way. But I can see my Village of Luxembourg plan, my town of Montpelier plans that actually did pass and were passed by Colonel Mustard and I can't read that from here, Rosen Island, are nesting properly within the supervisory districts that were passed, so they'll turn green. And then the last stage is the aldermanic districts. And again, you can do this at any point once you pass your ward plan. It'll become a possibility to do aldermanic districts in your municipality once they're passed. Just again, the caution there is that if you are drawing on a set of wards and then something happens in stage 3 where you have to change that ward plan, then the groupings of wards won't make sense anymore and your plan will be kind of voided because your grouping wards no longer exist anymore. You're playing with a different set of Legos. Another thing to note here is that in the upper right-hand corner, the create new plan here on the screen, you'll see a new plans remaining. It says 87 there. Each county is given 200 plans to play with. And if you ever need more or run out, you can always notify us and we can probably expand it for you, which is a precaution from getting kind of too out of control and not deleting plans that were creating too many. So just a side note. So how do we know when we're actually receiving these plans, what are practice and what are real, and when the actual plans have been passed by your town boards. We have confirmation credentials. So the land information officer for the county clerk, and all the municipal clerks will all be issued 6-digit IDs that are specific to that actual individual's role. These will be given then into the system to confirm that I am this person. I have authority to approve this municipal ward plan or this county supervisory district plan, and go ahead and submit it. And here is the ordinance that was created to pass this plan at a board level. We'll have a lot of mechanisms in place, either through our contact pages or on our pages, or through our contacts in local governments about getting you these codes. We have a list of all the municipal clerks in the state, so we'll try to keep those updated as possible to make sure this isn't going to be a huge ordeal for you to get a hold of these codes. Hopefully it'll all be pretty streamlined with all of our mechanisms in place. But you'll evolve, all the municipal clerks out there will be eventually receiving an email with these code in ahead of time. So actually making these plans, this is done inside of the WiseLR editor. So all that business before was all the administrator. It's just creating plans, sharing plans, approving plans, moving down through phases and seeing who's done what. Another part is the editor. So the actual fun part, drawing by numbers. You'll see here on the right side, this is the WiseLR editor. The little numbers you'll see inside of it, inside the little polygons, those are the actual populations of the blocks, so the US Census blocks. The colors of the districts. So this is an example of drawing a supervisory district plan, as you can tell, because it's more than one municipality. At the bottom, you'll see an attribute table with the currently summarized populations, the demographics of that those districts. And then there's shy away panels here on the left for assignments, for labels and layering. So it's adding on reference layers, demographic overlays, currently enacted plans from other phases. So if I'm in stage 2, I'll be able to turn on stage 1's lines to see how the county drew. I'm going to go through some of this stuff quickly, but we have a much more detailed kind of hands-on training courses. We will offer in March, April of this coming up year. But we also have some stuff recorded online as well already that exists on the website again at the bottom. That goes more into the nits and grits of this editor and drawing. So the attribute table at the bottom is kind of 2 modes for it. One is the municipal ward mode, and one's the district mode, or the aldermanic district mode. Upper right-hand corner is an example of part of the ward drawing plan. So as Mike mentioned, there are specific ranges that your wards are allowed to be population-wise, depending on the total population of your municipality. So in this specific example, the municipality that I'm using may only have wards between 300 to 1,000 people. You can still pass a plan that exceeds out of that range if there are extenuating circumstances. For instance, a supervisory district or a legislative district or a congressional district forces a municipality to draw a ward that's too small because of how it's been cut off. There are other edge case scenarios, but generally the valid range is usually have to be between these set statutory values. It also shows percent deviations. People do like to balance their wards if they can, population-wise, but as Mike mentioned, there's no statutes that require you to do that. You can make a 300-person ward and a 1,000-person ward, and that's still valid. They'll just go bold though, again, red, they'll let you pass it. They won't stop you, but it's going to let you know that it's incorrect, according to the statute. There are also, here at the bottom here was the deviations. So as Mike said, their supervisory districts are supposed to be as evenly divided as possible. So deviations are just the deviation from the ideal population. So if supervisory district has 20 plans, population divided by 20 districts, and my plan here at the top here, District 1 is 89 people short of that perfect population value. And then you'll see some other fun fields in here, like some geometric attributes. So you'll see this contiguous column here and its compactness column. So the contiguous, there's a contiguous requirement for wards where ward geography has to all be touching other parts of ward geography. So my example here in the upper right, the District 1 there is contiguous, as all polygons in it are all touching each other, whereas the second district there is not contiguous. That the block with the 13 inside of it is not properly touching the rest of District 2. Corner to corner contiguity does not count in Wisconsin, so you have to actually be sharing an actual boundary. And then again, for District 3 there, the one with 12 inside of it is obviously not connected at all to the rest of it, so it's shown as contiguous. In the application, if you click on the false in the column, it will actually zoom you into whatever polygon happens to be not contiguous to the rest of the districts you've drawn. There's a caveat here. In the Wisconsin, we have something called municipal islands, and town islands also that exist from annexations that have created town islands. Technically, those town islands can be connected to wards that exist as part of the main bulk of the municipality, and it's still considered contiguous. In the application, we'll try to connect those manually between those two polygons. So in statute, yes, you can connect those, but in geography, they're just not connected. So you might see a false contiguous where it says that's not connected, but it actually is, just based on the fact that it's a town island. So it's not the holy grail end-all decider of if it's contiguous or not, but it is a good guide for you. The other piece of geography measurement we have is the compactness measurements. There aren't as many compactness requirements about wards, but there are about supervisory districts. There are generally 3 algorithms that are most widely used: the Polsey-Popper, Schwartzberg, and area convex hull ratio. And you can choose whichever one you want to use to draw it. But the 0 is the least compact, and 1 is the most compact. So I'll go through these quickly here. We're running out of time. The Polsey-Popper, briefly, it basically takes the a circle with the same circumference as a district. So in this example, district's perimeter, that red district, which actually is the original gerrymander district, which the term gerrymander comes from, and the circle had the exact same length, but then we compare the areas of that district with the area of the circle to get the ratio of how considered compact that is. Whereas Schwartzberg is kind of the opposite. It's the area of the circle is equal to the area of that polygon. Then we compare the perimeters of the polygon with the circle, and that ratio is the Schwartzberg ratio. And again, one is most compact, so 1 would be a perfect circle, and 0 would be the least compact possible. And then last is the area convex hull. This is a little bit different. It measures a convex hull polygon, so it's a polygon with no intrusions that fits around your polygon district and compares the areas of those 2 polygons together. It will allow very rectangular wide districts to happen without penalizing them, but it will penalize for anything that has any kind of convex shape to it. So a she-shaped district. Part of the WISE district, WISE LR editor is a bunch of functions for sharing plans. So we have, every time you edit and create a plan, you'll have a viewer URLs that you have access to and the sharing plans. So one's a public share URL. So if I click share plan here on the left, that public share URL becomes active, and I can send it off to anybody who I want to, and they can see the plan, they can interact with it. They can turn on different reference layers. They can see the demographics at the bottom, the attribute table. They can do all the stuff they want to do. They just can't edit or assign anything. They can just view it. What's cool is that while you're editing the plan, it also updates live. So if you keep editing the plan while it's being shared and they're viewing it, you can hit refresh and see it. There's also a private version of the same URL that will can be sent out privately without having to share it to anybody else publicly. So if you have let's say hypothetically a town board meeting and everybody's stuck at home with COVID and you're drawing, everybody wants to see what you're drawing, they can pull up these private share URLs and they can look at their URL and watch you draw live while you're drawing on the phone, and you can see, reflect immediately what they're actually seeing. Totaling, and then you can turn on your own layers and view it how you want to. You can also export and import things through file base, of course. So you can export things as block lists, as GIS shape files. So if you have a GIS office that wants to pull things in or push things out, they can import and export things back in and out. I can import and export other plans into my plan, a whole bunch of fun stuff about sharing plans. If you have a bunch of questions for us, we were happy to take them. So we have a QA right now open. It doesn't look like time for a demo today, but we have a bunch of things on our website for demoing the software in further detail, but also be happy to open your questions.
Folks, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in that Q&A box. There, again, that Q&A icon is found by hovering over the bottom middle portion of your screen, and you can go ahead and put your questions there, and we'll get to those as we have a few minutes left here.
I want to mention again that we'll be doing some kind of a hands-on learning workshop training later on in the spring as well, again this year. We haven't planned any firm dates or how that's going to look yet with COVID, but we'll let you guys know.
Great. Additionally, if you have that chat box open, earlier Mike Gallagher did post a link to the redistricting guidebook and talked about some of the resources there, as well as the statutes that they quoted here today. And then also in the chat box, there's the local redistricting website there that Ryan was referencing. I'm going to take our lack of questions as a sign that you gentlemen did a great job presenting, and everybody got their questions answered. We did record this presentation, and the League is planning to post it on our website and on the one of the links there shared today. There are slides for this presentation if you want those as well. Any last comments from our presenters? Joe, Mike, or Ryan? Any last comments here?
There's one comment here. I see a question. When counties draw supervisory districts, so the ratios of urban to rural measured, it seems that urban areas can be underrepresented quite easily. I guess in terms of population, supervisory districts are supposed to be as well balanced. I'll pass it to Mike, but supposed to be as well balanced as possible. So urban rural doesn't really measure into it as much as just population value.
Yeah, there's that. They have to be substantially equal in population, as Joe was talking about, in terms of having that 10% overall range for the whole plan, and then also, you know, the communities of interest and taking account of that would come into play there. But certainly they have to, the districts have to be drawn in such a way that they would typically probably combine rural areas to match populations of the more dense urban areas.
Great. And I think that's it as far as questions. We did go rather quickly today, so thanks to the attendees for bearing with us. We wanted to make sure we covered a good amount of ground, but again, there's a lot more detail, and this can all be found on the legislative websites there included in the chat. I want to thank Ryan, Mike, and Joe for presenting, and Stacy and Grace for answering questions in the background. Yeah, we'll do we want to answer this last question we had pop in the Q&A box? Chris wants to know when the state redraws their lines.
Well, I think as Mike pointed out in his presentation, and he can jump in here too, is ideally they wait until the locals have all their wards in place and all their lines drawn. And so typically that would be, I'm trying to look at the calendar in my mind here, it would be the fall of, what, 2021? typically that's the way it's supposed to operate. We're talking October 2021, thereabouts.
Great.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of things affect that timing. You know, it could happen later. Under the Constitution, it requires the legislature to establish state legislative districts in its first session after the census. So that really actually gives it kind of a 2-year period. And in the past, you know, they would go beyond that period, but in recent decades, actually since the Supreme Court established the one-person, one-vote rule in the 1960s, the courts have, if the legislature hasn't been able to get maps in place that are approved by the governor, because they are bills just like other bills subject to veto, then the courts would put something in place, and that's what typically has happened in past decades.
Great. Great. So I'm going to end it here for us for today. Thank you so much again for presenting, and thank you to our attendees for staying on. And we will provide links and all of this from the League website and share the resources that were shared today. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
Thank you.